This week on Business Brief, a look at how a little-known tax makes a big impact on Missouri's park system. Then, how mid-Missouri art sales are remaining steady amid an economic turndown. Welcome to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Noah Grabianski, and I am joined by my new co-host, Sam Jackson. Sam, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It's great to have you on the team. Now let's get into the headlines. Consumer prices rose more than 4% over the last 12 months ending in May, as well as 0.5% from April to May, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. This increase in the inflation rate was largely driven by energy prices, with gasoline prices jumping 7% in May and over 40% in the last year. Economic experts have blamed the war in Iran for higher energy prices, as well as an increase in data center construction across the country. The other inflation driver was food, with prices of vegetables and beef jumping over 10% from last year due to increased protein demand and a shortage of cattle.
Missouri is expected to exhaust a surplus of funds that was expected to balance the state's budget going into the next fiscal year, according to a report from the state auditor. The report states that a lack of money in the General Revenue Fund would force the state to use emergency budget reduction, meaning less money for state-sponsored programs. The report showed a worsening in the state finance since the previous report in December and projected no change in spending in July.
Thousands of hotel rooms booked for FIFA officials ahead of the World Cup in Kansas City have been canceled. Officials estimate that FIFA initially booked nearly 14% of the Kansas City Metro's hotel rooms, but about 75% of those room bookings were suddenly canceled. Local hotel bookings were already below projected numbers, and these uncompensated cancellations could deal a massive financial blow to the city, which was expecting a boom in sales with the global event. Hotel managers say this may be due to the World Cup pushing out other potential events, and they are unsure if they'll be able to fill these vacancies.
Panasonic is shifting production at its Kansas City electric vehicle battery plant to build energy storage systems for data centers. The company is investing $2 billion to reproduce production lines as the electric vehicle market slows down. The new batteries would store electric power for off hours at data centers and can be used as power sources in case of emergencies. The plant will continue to produce lithium-ion batteries for electric automakers such as Tesla.
Missouri is delaying Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program restrictions on candy, desserts, and sugary drinks until February 2027. The restrictions were initially announced by Governor Kehoe back in September in an effort to incentivize those relying on SNAP to find healthier alternatives, although critics railed against these restrictions for being unclear in what they limit. The delay comes as grocers warned there wasn't enough guidance to enforce these restrictions at checkout aisles across the state. It also gives the state time to increase education around what the restrictions affect and how healthier alternatives can be found.
9 Missouri businesses made the 2026 Fortune 500 list, a ranking of the largest businesses in the country based on revenue. Centene ranked highest among the state's firms on the list for the 8th year in a row and moved up 4 spots from last year to number 19. Reinsurance Group of America, Emerson Electric, and O'Reilly Automotive landed in the top half of the list. Ameren returned to the list after dropping off last year. Noah, have you ever heard of the park soil and water tax?
I have not, but it sounds like it has something to do with natural resources here in Missouri.
That's correct. It's the sales tax that keeps Missouri state parks free to the public, and it's going back on the ballot in August.
So if it's going back on the ballot, does that mean that it's been approved before?
Yes, overwhelmingly so, with support from 80% of the voters in every county in the state. But it's among 9 constitutional amendments going before voters in this year's election. Reporter Trevor Grandin looked at the impact this tax has on the park systems and why experts are concerned about its availability to cut through the noise this year. Here's that story.
Walking into one of Missouri's 93 state parks doesn't cost a dime. Out-of-state visitors to Nebraska will shell out $14 to take a hike. An annual pass to visit Kansas's state parks costs $25. In fact, Missouri is one of only 8 states in the country that offer free entry to their parks. That's thanks to an over 40-year-old sales tax Missourians have supported time and again. In 1972, a special tax that funded Missouri's state parks ran out, and the department started selling annual passes to make up the revenue. A December 1972 column from the St. Joseph Gazette described a way to beat the required fee. Just walk in. Only vehicles were required to have a permit.
We looked at annual passes, which is what many states do, but that was not well received by the citizens or the legislature. They didn't want to see us move to that, and so they actually did a special appropriation to pay back the passes that had been sold, and then we started getting general revenue.
That's Melanie Smith. She's the Deputy Director of Resources at Missouri's Parks Department. The annual passes lasted less than 2 months until the entry fee was scrapped and refunds were issued. Then in 1984, the current tax was passed, a 0.1% sales tax on all purchases in Missouri. Or for every $100 purchased, 10 cents is given to the park's soil and water tax. That 10 cents is split even further. One half funds programs for soil and water conservation, and the other funds the park system. Smith says in 2025, the department earned $69.9 million from the tax, or about 75% of the department's budget. The rest comes from fees, grants, and donations. Kendra Varnes-Wallace is the executive director of the Missouri Parks Association, a nonprofit that helped lead the amendment's original petition process. She says the tax funds a lot of park operations, from trail maintenance and wastewater systems down to making sure bathrooms are stocked with hand soap and toilet paper.
When you think about it, like state parks are kind of like a little town, and so they have all these layers that they have to take care of. Like pump stations and things you don't think about, and that's what that money goes to.
But why are Missourians voting on it again this year? Well, the amendment says voters will reconsider the tax every 10 years, and if it fails to pass, the tax ends. Since 1984, it successfully passed 4 times. And in her personal opinion, Wallace says voting on the tax every decade keeps everyone involved accountable.
It makes, the employees, the visitors, the people who contract with state parks, everyone's accountable to be the best that they can be. And then every 10 years, you're graded on it for people to renew.
The park soil and water tax, which will show up this year as Amendment 1, was placed on the August primary ballot. Alongside it will be Amendment 5, a measure that could phase out the income tax. In a voting cycle dominated by tax discussions, those in favor of the state parks tax are a little worried. Jonathan Ratliff is the campaign manager for Citizens for State Park Soil and Water.
Well, you can tell from my hairline, but yeah, I have a lot of fear at any given time, right? So yeah, that is definitely a concern, right? The rumors out there from what the campaign on Amendment 5 could be, you're talking $30 million or more. That's a loud conversation, and that's a lot of noise.
Organizations that may not normally find themselves on the same side of an issue have come together for over 40 years in support of this tax. And in an era of hyper-partisan politics, Ratliff finds this amendment refreshingly nonpartisan. For him, the tax is evidence that people can still come together to benefit the common good.
There are plenty of times in, I'm sure, your daily life and my daily life that I wonder if can we as Missourians or as Americans actually agree on things anymore? And I think it's refreshing to see on this issue, yes, we can.
So, Sam, a lot of the stories we've covered lately have to do with the current state of the economy.
Right. The high inflation rate, rising energy prices, and so on.
But I was curious about whether people were still investing in art, which led me to visit with vendors at Columbia's annual Art in the Park event on Sunday to learn more.
And what did you find out?
Well, the vendors I encountered said sales at Art in the Park didn't drop this year, even with a rain delay Sunday morning. Leaders in the art community said this shows how the Mid-Missouri community will still invest in art, even in difficult economic times. Here's that story. The annual Art in the Park Festival in Columbia was interrupted Sunday morning by strong summer storms. But when the skies cleared in the afternoon, Mid-Missourians came out in full force to support artists from across the state and beyond. Steve Ryan was one such artist, hailing from Quincy, Illinois. He makes Abvara pottery, which uses a sealing technique from 12th century Eastern Europe.
gives a real natural, organic look to the pieces. I want them to look like they were grown in a garden, or maybe you dug them up out of a burial site somewhere, something along that line.
This was his second year in a row as a vendor at Art in the Park.
We got wet last year too, but that's okay. The people show up for this event, and it's what tickled me, and that's why I come back this year, is they still show up even in the rain. You go to a lot of other shows, the minute it rains, they're gone.
In a booth across Stevens Lake Park, Nick Kindred sold handmade wooden art and tools.
And this year, yesterday, I know a lot of people had record-setting days. I had a very good day as well, a great day of weather, and even today, after a rain delay in the morning, people are coming out again.
Recent reports have shown that Americans have been facing tough economic conditions. The inflation rate has risen 75% since May of last year, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Gas prices in Missouri are still close to $4 a gallon, according to AAA, and grocery prices have steadily increased for months, according to the Federal Reserve. But despite that, vendors at Art in the Park still saw strong sales and attendance that even a rain delay couldn't put a damper on. But why? Kelsey Hammond, the executive director of the Columbia Arts League, says it's because art is something people will always fall back on, especially in rough times.
During the pandemic, what did people do? They learned how to make bread. People took up sewing. Do you know what's important? The people make things with their hands. People were taking watercolor classes online. They were like, oh, okay. Art sales were up. Meaning people buying art was up.
For Hammond, it's about so much more than the economics of art. It's also about the community aspect, humans connecting with other humans about the things they have in common.
I think that people think that it's something that gets cut and people aren't supporting art in the same way, which is probably true in the sort of bigger picture. But also when people are feeling sad about the world and maybe that it's harder to afford something, they're saving their money to buy something that makes them feel good. And what art does is it gives you a connection to other people. It gives you a connection to your community. It's something that you can look back on. You've made a memory.
Hammond says that's what Art in the Park is all about. She says the event sees consistent levels of volunteering from year to year, and that some have even been volunteering consistently for decades now. Hammond feels this kind of enthusiasm from the community translates directly into sales, and Kindred, the woodworker from Art in the Park, agrees.
Just having done this for almost a decade now, I will say that this particular festival takes care of their artists in a way that many do not. I think it's happy vendors, who want to come back, and I think the people who come notice that the vendors are maybe a higher quality, and also that they're happy. And so the conversations that we have with everybody, I think, are a little better because of that.
The Columbia Arts League is a nonprofit, meaning much of its money comes from commissions on art that sells through the gallery. Hammond acknowledges that while art can be an investment commodity, most people don't have the kind of money to be attending things like, say, high-end Sotheby's auctions. But that doesn't mean that art spending isn't important, and Hammond suggests that art enthusiasts invest in their emotions, which in turn will help give back to the community and support the arts.
You have to invest in how it makes you feel, regardless of the price. And that's the important part. So does that make it a commodity? Not really, no matter what the price is. If you love it, then if you can, then you should have it. You've supported an artist. If you buy it from us, you've supported a local community nonprofit. You know what I mean? Then you have this thing that you appreciate. You'll tell your friends about. You have this meaningful moment with.
And now it's time for our words of the week. Sam, what is your word this week?
My word is library.
Ooh, is there a new summer reading program?
Not quite, but people are checking out more library materials, though it might not be what you expected. Libraries across the state report seeing more interest in resources that help people save money, learn new skills, and access services they would otherwise pay someone else to do.
And I'm guessing this, again, has something to do with the general belt-tightening many people are doing in the current economic climate?
Exactly. Librarians said that more people are checking out cookbooks in an effort to reduce spending money at restaurants.
I mean, that does sound like a good, cheap way to find recipes. And how else are people using libraries to save money?
Another big area is entertainment. People are renting out more DVDs from libraries, as well as using free streaming platforms like Canopy or Hoopla to save money on paid streaming services. Many librarians say that this trend isn't new, and that libraries have historically been a resource in times of economic hardship. What's your word for this week?
Well, speaking of recipes, my word is brisket.
Sounds like it's just in time for a warm summer cookout.
And just in time for the World Cup. Cisco, the restaurant food distributor, is ramping up production at its Olathe distribution center to anticipate increased food demand during the weeks-long sports event.
I imagine the demand for summer sports food will be high, but how high are we talking?
We're talking 160,000 pounds of brisket, 117,000 pounds of French fries, 62,000 bags of potato chips, and 40,000 pounds of chicken wings.
Wow, now that's a lot of food.
And Cisco is also upping its distribution methods. It'll be deploying over 160 additional truckloads of food and adding 5 new daily delivery routes in the Kansas City area.
And I'm sure customers will be thrilled to start digging in.
I'm sure they will. Now it's time for our closing thought. For our closing thought, here's Kendra Varnes-Wallace, the executive director of the Missouri Parks Association, on the importance of free trail access in the state.
We have such great trails and things to do in Missouri, and having a system to where, if you just want to go for a walk, you don't have to pay to do it. I personally don't think you should have to pay to go for a walk.
Well, that is all for this week. The M33 Project provided the music for this episode. For my co-host Sam Jackson and editors Trevor Grandin and Kelly DeRook, I'm Noah Grabianski. This has been Business Brief. Thank you for listening.